Katie Merrill, and I'll be the moderator this morning. Before we get started, I just want to, this is a cell phone, and it's not really welcome here right now. If you have one too, tell it to just be very, very quiet. And if it does, if your cell phone makes noise, we will hear, and we'll kind of maybe judge a little bit. So try to just avoid that. That'd be best. I put mine in airplane mode, pro tip. So before, as we get started, welcome to the new season of the Ethical Humanist Society. There's room upstairs in the balcony for people who are coming in. We're going to start with a reading from Ray Berg, a brief reading, and then we'll continue from there. So I'm going to ask Ray to come on up. Thanks.
I figured it'd be fine to not include the name of the author, but here it is. We don't know who the author's name is, but I'll tell you later if you want to know. It's a very good reading on doubt. Cherish your doubts, for doubt is the attendant of truth. Doubt is the key to the door of knowledge. It is the servant of discovery. A belief which may not be questioned binds us to error, for there is incompleteness and imperfection in every belief. Doubt is the touchstone of truth. It is an acid which eats away at the false. Let no one fear the truth, that doubt may consume it. For doubt is a testing of belief. The truth stands boldly and unafraid and is not shaken by the testing. For truth, if it be truth, arises from each testing stronger, more secure. Those that would silence doubt are filled with fear, their houses built on shifting sands. But those who fear not doubt and know its use are founded on a rock. They shall walk in the light of growing knowledge. The work of their hands shall endure. Therefore, let us not fear doubt, but let us rejoice in its help. It is to the wise as a staff to the blind. Doubt is the attendant of truth.
Sunday school kids to go ahead and skedaddle to Sunday school. And anyone else who wants to just make a quick exit, this is a good time. Because this is our first Sunday in the new season, we're going to have a word of welcome from our president, Catherine Ross.
Welcome to the first of our fall programs. I'm Catherine Ross, President of the Board of Trustees for the Ethical Humanist Society of Chicago. If you're a newcomer, I want to extend a special welcome to you. I hope you enjoy the program and stay for coffee and conversation afterwards. You will find that we are an engaged and caring community focused on the ethical values that bring people together, not on the beliefs that keep people apart. Our mission is to create a supportive and inclusive humanist community that inspires all to be their best selves, sustains us throughout life's milestones with celebrations, memorials, and festivals, respects science, art, and nature, promotes critical thinking and rational ways to solve human problems, and creates opportunities to take action to bring about a better world for all. To our members, welcome back. I am so glad to see you. As you all know, we are a leaderless society. There is no one individual, including the president, who guides us in our focus and actions. The leader of our community is all of us, collectively, deciding the direction and goals of the community through participation in activities and on committees. The president and the board's job is to facilitate this collective vision of the community. This year, I am excited to say that on the advice of an ad hoc committee focused on community growth, the board has declared the upcoming season to be a year of humanist community building at the Ethical Humanist Society. As I explained in my recent letter to the members, this will consist of a number of events designed to support this effort that we hope everyone will participate in. Events are still being planned, So let any board member know if you have ideas and want to be involved in the planning. Events currently in the works include special Saturday community building workshops in the fall and spring with prominent national humanist speakers. The fall workshop will be with Herb Silverman, founder of the Secular Coalition of America, on Saturday, October 27th. On Sunday, he will be having a program for everybody. Mark your calendars. In the spring, we'll have a community-wide service project that will be a team building opportunity for all of our members, young and old, where we will come together to make a positive contribution to our community. And coming up soon, in October and November, there will be a series of member dinners that we hope every member will attend. If you have not been invited to yours yet, expect an invitation in the next week or so. As always, our programming committee, our fabulous programming committee, has put together another fine roster of speakers. But we know it is not enough for us to simply sit and absorb these ideas. As ethical humanists, we must also act on them, because our faith is in people. We believe in the ability and responsibility of people to be the creators of a better world. So, not only do we have fabulous programs like the one you will hear today, but we also have groups and committees through which we organize our various inclinations into actions that help to make a difference. We hope that today's program causes you to think and ask questions. Coming together in a community like ours is what ultimately will make our world better. So enjoy today's program, come back, bring a friend, enjoy a coffee hour afterwards, and then get involved. I now hand everything back over to Katie. Thank you very much.
So again, I'm Katie Merrill. I'm a one-time member of the Society, and as Catherine just said, as part of this initiative for this year, we're going to start each platform with a humanist moment. That's not its official name, that's what I'm calling it, but the committee involved should take note. It's a good idea. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to read from a brief excerpt from a interview with Gloria Steinem from 2012 when she was named the American Humanist Association's Humanist of the Year. And she said lots of things, but the thing I'm going to read is this. Always remember that change starts at the bottom. I think we're disempowered by the idea that it starts at the top, when really change is like a tree. It does start at the bottom. Also remember that we're communal creatures. We need each other. If we're by ourselves, we do come to feel crazy and alone. So if I had one wish for the feminist movement worldwide, for the democratic movement worldwide, for the humanist movement worldwide, it would be a kind of revolutionary AA, a network consisting of small groups that could easily find small enough so that everyone can speak and everyone can listen. We need these kinds of revolutionary cells. We need these groups of diverse people with shared purpose who meet regularly, support each other, and create another reality, because right now we're swimming in someone else's reality much of the time. And I picked that quote in large part after reading the bio of today's speaker. Hopefully he'll see the connection. So today our programs address a wide variety of topics, from current events, philosophy, arts, and sciences to other important topics. Today's presentation is part of our programming related to current events. And we're really lucky to have with us Seth Andrews, who's an author and speaker on the subject of atheism. He is the creator and host of the Thinking Atheist online community, podcast, and YouTube channel, and the author of the self-published books Deconverted and Sacred Cows, and you can buy them from Seth afterwards. Prior to his atheist activism, he was a fundamentalist Christian and had a 10-year career as a Christian radio host. Seth was born in Tulsa, raised into a Christian family with parents who studied theology, and he was baptized into the Eastwood Baptist Church. When his public school education conflicted with the religious teachings of that he received at home, his parents transferred him to a small church-owned Christian school and later to a Baptist school. As a student leader, he eagerly participated in school functions and religious activities, including weekly church services, the student council, and the local branch of Youth for Christ, for which he was a spokesman. Seth was a fan of Christian music and hosted a morning Christian show for 10 years in Oklahoma. In 2004, he saw that, some of you are familiar with the Christopher Hitchens debate with a rabbi about faith and religion, and that gave him the courage to leave his faith. In 2008, he finally came out as an atheist to his family and friends, and he found no community of like-minded people, so he decided to build one. Gloria Steinem, remember her? She said that. At this point, he has a website, Facebook page, YouTube channel, and podcast, and he'll have the next new thing that the tech guys create once they create it. It's called The Thinking Atheist. His goal is to connect with other non-believers online and share some of the information, this is a quote, that I had found helpful in the hope of making the journey out of superstition easier for others. He considers the website to be a venue which allows people to engage their doubts and question their faith, and thus live a healthier life. Seth will give his a presentation, and then we'll have a brief interlude, after which we'll have questions. So just now, I want to welcome Seth to give us his talk, Unskeptical, Finding the Real Story in a World of Half-Truths. Thanks.
She made my story sound so much more exciting than it really is. It's like a movie, you know. I landed in Madison yesterday morning. I was going to the Freedom from Religion Foundation offices, but I landed at the airport and I was getting my rental car. Walked up, it was Enterprise Rental, and there was a guy in front of me, and I guess Madison's a big place for the Iron Man, I learned. So this big 0% body fat dude is standing in front of me, and he's checking in to get his car. And the lady at the desk was like, "Oh, you're doing the Iron Man?" He's like, yeah, I'm doing the Iron Man. And they talked for a few, and he got his keys, and he went away. And I walked up to the desk, and she looked me over, and she goes, "Here on business?" That hurts me. Wisconsin welcome there. So anyway, I was speaking in Milwaukee yesterday, and I'm so glad to be here today. I'll tell you, EHS, everybody here, the hospitality I've received is it is amazing. I'm so grateful and honored that you would chew into a weekend to be here to listen to me for what it's worth. Those who follow my work everywhere I go always ask about my kids. This is Henry and a rat dog. So Henry is the dark one, he's my rescue, and then Rat Dog, her real name is Tootsie, but we call her Rat Dog. She's on the right. And they become sort of my unofficial mascots everywhere I go. Everybody's like, "How are Henry and Rat Dog? How are Henry and Rat Dog?" And we do videos, we'll bring them in and hold them up on camera. I've had people draw watercolor paintings of them and sign them and bring them to events, and they've just become part of my extended family. So yes, they're good, and yes, I'm not too shameless to use cute animal photos to endear myself to an audience of strangers in Chicago, Illinois. I want to tell you a story today, and hopefully it'll be a whole and honest story. It starts with this woman. Her name is Stella Liebeck. Off the bat, anybody know who Stella Liebeck is? Okay, hang with me. She passed away 14 years ago at the age of 91 years old. Even if you don't know this woman's face, I will bet that you know her story. It was the 27th of February, 1992. She was a spry 79 years old. She's in a car, and she goes to this McDonald's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Anybody heard the McDonald's coffee burn story? Now we tracking? Okay. Ordered a coffee from this very McDonald's in Albuquerque, and she likes cream and sugar with her coffee, and so they don't mix it for you, or they didn't, so they gave her the cream and sugar packets through the drive-through window, and she mixed it in to the coffee. But when she popped the lid to the coffee, the contents spilled out onto her lap and burned her skin. She sued. A lawsuit was brought against McDonald's, and a jury awarded Stella Liebeck $2.9 million. And if you can accurately say so about a pre-internet story in 1992, it went viral. Everybody was talking about it. And the first reaction was most likely the obvious reaction you and I would have. Come on, it's coffee. It's hot. Of course it's going to burn. You gotta be careful. careful with it. Everybody with the brain knows this. The media went crazy on this story. Everybody was talking about the hot coffee lawsuit. Then came the protest about frivolous lawsuits. Oh, they're abusing the courts. It's ridiculous waste. It's insanity to award millions of dollars to somebody who can't even handle their own coffee. Organizations like this one even called it lawsuit lotto, a way to get rich using the court system. Get rich litigation. And the public was crying out in protest and outrage, we need tort reform. Many of us not even knowing at the time what tort is. Of course, a tort is a baked, delicious dish with pastry base and filling. No, okay. Tort reform, derived from the French word for wrong, and tort reform talks about limiting the types of lawsuits that people can bring against corporations, etc., and the limitation on the kind of damage and the amount of damages they might receive. Well, I was a relatively young and This Is America Christian at the time. This is America. This is America. What's this country coming to? Somebody spills coffee and gets a settlement of millions of dollars over this. This is just ridiculous. The waste of the people. You know, when we were younger, people used to take responsibility for them. So it's time to take our country back. This narrative continues every single election cycle. But it was also true back in the mid-90s, and I was one of those people. I was one of those critics. Too many parasites out there, they're gaming the system. We need to reform the system. We need to take our country back. Of course, I couldn't tell you the woman's name. I couldn't tell you the city in which it happened. I couldn't tell you any of the details, except for the bullet points, the informational bullet points posted above. And these are facts. This is information. Woman spills coffee on herself in a car, sues a big corporation, and she wins $1 million in the settlement, or in the judgment, rather. These are pieces of information that are at face value factually true. But it's weird because even though these are facts that tell the story, these facts are not the story or the full story. First, her injury was not the first. In the 10 years prior to 1992, there had been 700 other reported incidents of burns from McDonald's coffee. 700 other people reporting up to third-degree burns. 10 years, 700 separate incidents preceding hers. This is a car like the one they were in. It's not the exact vehicle. It's an '89 Ford Probe. She was riding in it, had no cup holders, so she had to balance the coffee in her lap at the time. By the way, I did use the word riding in because while people were saying, what was she doing handling her coffee behind the wheel, she wasn't behind the wheel. Grandson, Cristiano, was actually driving the car. She was in the passenger seat. And you know what? He wasn't driving the car because they were in a parking space. They did the right thing to be safe. He pulled right into the McDonald's parking space and allowed her in a still not moving car to pop the lid and do the cream and sugar so they can then proceed safely. The average temperature of coffee in our homes, coffee pot runs about 150 to 160 degrees. But McDonald's maintained a policy which directed its coffee to be a full 30 degrees hotter, almost boiling temperature. Now, this is a warning to those who may not want to see these images, and I'll walk you through it. I'm going to show you Stella Liebeck's burns. If you do not want to see them, just look away. I will give you the all clear, I promise. Okay? When you and I think coffee burn, what do we think? You and I are like, I've done that. Right? Hot stove, hit something that just came out of the oven, spilled coffee. Yeah, I know what that's like. And she got $2.9 million for that. That's crazy. Except that is not Stella Liebeck's coffee burn. That is Stella Liebeck's coffee burn to her thighs. The image above is that's the area they took skin grafts so that they could do skin grafts inside the thighs. And she was permanently disfigured. The woman was disfigured for the rest of her life. Okay, we're done with the burn photos. Okay. The safe word, I'm saying the safe word, you can now look up at me, okay? Now, was her first instinct when this horrible thing happened to say, I'm going to sue you guys to your last penny? No. She did something amazingly reasonable, almost deferential. She said, look, all I want is about 20 grand to cover my hospital bills. I want McDonald's to pay that, and I want an agreement in place that they will adjust their temperature as a policy in McDonald's nationwide. Perfectly reasonable request, I think, don't you? McDonald's declined that request and made a counteroffer. They made a cash offer to the tune of $100. It was only in the face of this that Stella Liebeck actually filed a lawsuit against this major corporation. And when a jury actually saw the facts of the case, especially against the long history of injury and McDonald's unchanging coffee policy, they didn't award her millions in compensation. That amount was $160,000 in compensation for her injury. But would $160,000 prompt a multi-billion dollar corporation to change its ways? Very possibly not. How do you get a multi-billion dollar corporation to change its ways? You hit them in the pocketbook. Punitive damages. And so, a punitive amount of $2.7 million was added to that judgment to make McDonald's cool its coffee down so nobody else gets hurt. And Stella Liebeck walked away a millionaire, right? No. The judge reduced the award to $480,000. I think she got even less when it was all over. $480,000. And yet, this poor woman became the poster child for frivolous lawsuits. Here's a guy named Randy Cassingham. He wrote a book called The True Stella Awards, honoring real cases of greedy, opportunist, frivolous lawsuits and the law run amok. And he named his awards for frivolous lawsuits after this woman. She didn't ask for any of this. And they have the awards, I guess, every single year for what they deem frivolous. So this is information. And on the surface, it's factual information. This stuff's true. We have information, but unfortunately, we don't have enough information to give us perspective about the story. Yeah, she spilled the coffee, but it was scalding on a pile of previous complaints. She attempted a reasonable solution on third-degree burns to her body, permanent disfigurement. She tried everything else, and finally, she ended up with a few $100,000 for her trouble. Here's a story that you may have been following. Anybody remember this little piece of outrage from the Cubs game? All right, if you haven't seen this, I'm just going to show you a real short video clip. Now, you have to watch real close. Start with your eyes on the baseball player, and then it'll come back and it will play in slow motion, okay? This happened July 21st at Wrigley Field. Watch closely. So the player throws the ball to the boy. You'll see it again here in slow-mo. Picks up the baseball, tosses it to the kid, rolls under the seat, and the guy behind him takes the ball and gives it to his wife. And when I saw this story on Twitter, I had the same reaction as many of you had. That mother... That son of... How could he do that? Outrage. Everybody was forwarding it. The story went immediately viral. The Chicago Cubs on Twitter showed the child. Is it Javi Baez? Thank you. I don't follow baseball, I follow tennis, but I want to make sure I don't, offend any Cubs fans on there. It's okay. Javi Baez comes to the rescue and he gives a signed baseball. He makes everything right again with the universe, except, for the horrible piece of a human being who was sitting behind the boy who stole the ball and gave it to his wife, all right? He had in 12 short seconds become the national villain. When we saw this on social media, what was the reaction? Well, we were like, this is just, I can't believe he did that. God, this is an outrage. What's happening to this country? That guy. This is exactly what most of us do. Okay. There's a YouTube channel called Hot Sports, and their title of their video of this was Terrible Grown Man Steals Foul Ball from Little Kid at Cubs Game. Hundreds of thousands of views at the time I took this screenshot. This is a long time ago. Now, we had information, but did we have perspective? Like we saw with our very own eyes what had happened. But did we have the story? Check that Twitter photo of the young boy posing with his baseballs. Plural. Baseballs? Hey, wait a minute. Why does he have more than one? Chuck Mykoff was at the game, tweeted that he was sitting over next to him. He said the other ball the kid has was the one that same guy caught and gave to him I was sitting next to him, saw the whole thing. Another guy named Jeff verified. He said, I was sitting next to the boy. The same fan helped him snag a ball a few innings before this. The story of the man and his wife was they were celebrating their wedding anniversary, never been to Wrigley Field before, a momentous occasion, and this was their first ever visit. And then he presented his wife the baseball as a keepsake, a way to remember the occasion. But only after he had helped snag baseballs for that young boy and 2 other kids who were sitting around them. So the accurate headline is not terrible grown man steals foul ball. The true and fair headline should be generous guy snags balls for little kids at the Cubs game. But we all know what the news outlets are like when it comes to inflammatory headlines and stories versus the retractions about those stories. Did anyone here see the retraction? Very few. We had information, but not enough information to give us perspective. Let me talk about a Netflix documentary very quickly called Making a Murderer. Now, if you haven't seen this documentary, there are going to be a few spoilers in what I'm about to tell you. And if you really want to be surprised, now's a good time for coffee. Okay? 5 minutes is all I need. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you walk out. 5 minutes. But I honestly think that, and I do think you should watch the 10-part series. I think you should watch it with the knowledge I'm about to give you, because I honestly think it'll make it more interesting for you. I know it was for me on my second viewing. Now, here is my extremely simplified version of a very complicated story, okay? This is Stephen Avery in 1985, 23 years old, went to prison for the rape of a local woman. Her name was Penny Ann Bernstein. And he served 18 years in prison. But he didn't do it. He was falsely accused, and he was exonerated after 18 years thanks to DNA evidence. And there were a lot of missteps by the cops when he was prosecuted. They made a lot of mistakes. There was a lot of bias. They didn't do their jobs, and he unjustly went to prison for 18 years. The story is already amazingly compelling. The actual rapist was a guy named Gregory Allen, who had a long history of sexual crimes. This is Stephen Avery after he gets out of prison 18 years later. In 2003, and he was preparing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the Manitowoc County Police Department. Obviously, right? They stripped 18 years of his life away. So it was $2 million a year, $36 million for the lawsuit for ruining his life. This is a woman named Teresa Hallback, 25 years old, worked for Auto Trader magazine. Now, this is after Stephen Avery has gotten out of prison, and I think in about the second year he's been out. Started his life again. Politicians are taking photographs with him, talking about the need for reform of our justice system. So much went wrong here, and everybody's jumping on this particular train. Stephen Avery has been out of prison, is a free man. So, 2 years later, this woman goes to photograph a vehicle at a salvage yard for Auto Trader magazines. And then she disappears. They find her car keys, they find human remains, blood, and other evidence. Where do they find this evidence? They find it on the property at the salvage yard of none other than Stephen Avery, this guy. Stephen's nephew, Brandon Dassey, an intellectually stunted young man who, during police questioning, confessed that he and his uncle did it. They murdered Teresa Hallback, and then they burned the body to ash in a fire pit. And it's a very compelling piece of the documentary, and there are some real problems that we, I think, should look at and address. But the clips from the documentary shown to us are set up to suggest that the cops, who were facing this massive lawsuit and national, perhaps international embarrassment, set Stephen Avery up for the murder of Teresa Hallback. They planted the blood. They got the vehicle there. They stuck the car keys in the house. They set him up because he had made them look bad. He'd already been wrongly convicted once, and now it was going to happen a second time. We watched the entire 10-hour documentary in a weekend. We were just episode after episode. Has anybody else seen Making a Murderer? The story makes for amazing television. And I had joined this chorus of outrage. It's a problematic conviction. I can't believe these people did that. They're inept or they're corrupt. I can't believe all the things. What's this guy? This poor guy's already spent 20 years. What's going to happen? Blah, blah, blah. There was petition circulated. This one had more than 500,000 signatures. It was targeted to then President Barack Obama, saying, "Free Stephen Avery." And it's understandable. This story strikes all the major chords. It's dramatic. It has a conspiracy narrative, and it speaks to our need to see injustices undone and justice done on every level. Making a Murderer works. But do we have enough information from the documentary filmmakers to have perspective? Here's just a few pieces of perspective for you, and I'll let you chew on it on your own. Michael Griesbach is a Wisconsin prosecutor. He chronicled the wrongful conviction of Avery back in 1985 and wrote a book about it called The Innocent Killer. And so he was actually revealing the ineptitude of the police department, the missteps, all the circumstances that played into his wrongful conviction and then his release, okay? Well, Michael Griesbach watched Making a Murderer, very familiar with Avery's story, and he was alarmed and shocked at what the documentary filmmakers had not been telling us in the audience. He actually wrote a book about it called Indefensible, The Missing Truth About Stephen Avery, Teresa Halbach, and Making a Murderer. Now, I'll leave it to you to do the deep digging, but I'm just going to walk you down a few examples, okay? Avery in the documentary was a good kid. Yeah, he kind of got himself into trouble sometimes, but don't all young people have those times when they get themselves into trouble and it becomes a story you talk about later? Like the time he and his buddies were all sitting around a bonfire and the family cat came around and he tossed the cat over the fire and the cat caught fire and the cat burned to death. He was just dumb. He was just being young and dumb. I can't believe I did it. I'm 20 years old, we were drinking, I wish I hadn't done it, blah, blah, blah. And then I ended up in jail over it for animal cruelty. And that's pretty much where the documentary left us. We didn't get word from the actual filed police report on his crime of cruelty to animals that he didn't just pick the can out and throw it over the bonfire because he was drunk and having a good time. He actually sought out the animal and he poured gas and oil all over the cat. And he tossed it in. When it escaped, he tossed it back until it was dead. That's a pretty important detail, don't you think? Griesbach correctly identifies right at the front two of the most common signals of homicidal behavior: animal cruelty, fascination with fire. The documentary just skips it. Instead, they made that segment about how sad it was that Avery was in jail and he missed the birth of his daughter. He wasn't able to be there. It was so sad. Told the story of his frustration with his cousin Sandra, who'd been talking behind his back. She'd been whispering and gossiping about him. She was just such a troublemaker, and yeah, they had some conflict. And they actually put her in the unflattering light. Glazed over with the facts that Avery had watched her movements for months. He was stalking her, often with binoculars. He stalked her car when she left for work at 5 a.m. Sometimes he stood out as she drove by naked, wearing only shoes, masturbating as she passed by. He rubbed his body on the hood of her car when he was able to stop the car. January 3rd, 1985, 7 months before this 1985 mugshot was taken, he rammed his car into her car, pulled a gun, pointed a rifle at her head, said, "Get out, get in my car, you're coming with me." And when she begged, "My baby will freeze," only then did he let her go. With this, before the wrongful conviction, Avery was already facing prison time as a habitual offender. This is before the wrongful conviction of 1985. Big section of the documentary talked about the blood vial. You know, the cops went into the blood evidence and they broke the seal on the box where the blood vial with Avery's blood was, and they took a syringe and they extracted some blood and they planted it all over the crime scene in Teresa Halbach's car. And if we find that there's a syringe mark in the blood vial, well, that's the smoking gun that this corrupt police force really did frame it. And it's a very dramatic moment in the documentary when they actually reveal, they open the box and reveal that yes, there's a syringe mark there. Somebody has been in this blood and extracted some. I mean, I was a sucker for this stuff. I was glued to the television. I had goosebumps. I was like, this is crazy. I can't believe this would happen. How did this happen? These people are so corrupt. I was so caught up in that moment. Documentary didn't bother to tell me at the time It would actually be more suspicious if the vial didn't have a syringe marker, because that's how the blood is actually inserted into the tube in the first place. And they have on record the nurse, Marlene Kranitz, who testified that she was the one who drew Avery's blood in 1996, and she was the one who actually inserted the blood via syringe into the vial. All of that glazed over. That's pretty important information. This seems important as well. Disallowed by the judge in Avery's court case and brushed over by the filmmakers. His niece told authorities that he'd molested her when she was 17 and threatened her family, harm to her family if she ever came forward. A January 26th interview with the same department, a 42-year-old woman going by a pseudonym said that he had molested her when she was a teenager. There was another interview with the Wisconsin Department of Criminal Investigation when she was 17. She used a synonym. She said that he had called her for sex the day before Teresa Hallback disappeared. She said, "You're gross," and hung up on him, essentially. Avery's wife had spent several days at the local domestic violence shelter while they were married because he so often beat her up, or she was afraid he would. From prison, he sent letters to the kids saying, "I'm going to mutilate and kill your mother." 2006, his girlfriend Jody called the cops about abuse, said he'd beaten her to bruises, and there's actually a phone call, a recorded phone call on record from January 7th, 2006, where Avery asked her in the recorded call to lie about where she got the bruises so they won't pin it on him. Tell him he just fell down. Tell him I beat you. By the way, she came forward after doing her interview for the documentary where she said there's no way he did it. She came forward afterwards and said, "I was afraid for my life. The truth is, the man's a killer. He did it." Anyone seen that one? Whenever part 2 of Making a Murderer releases, will we see that information? I don't know. But she's convinced that he murdered Teresa Hallback after all. We haven't even gotten to the crime scene evidence or the interview tapes or any of that other stuff. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So much more to the story, and I'll let you take that journey on your own. Because my purpose here is not to pronounce the guilt or innocence of Stephen Avery. I just want you to understand and see what I saw. Slick packaging had allowed me to have a wrong idea about the facts I was being presented. I had information, but not enough to have perspective. The documentary is worth watching, but only as a first step, and only with an asterisk. Anybody been following the Nike story? People burning their Nikes? Should they buy the Nikes and then they burn the Nikes? Anyone see their stock? I think their stock or profits went up like 30% immediately. Yeah, it's just amazing. Anybody see this story about the guy who burned the Nikes while he was wearing them? This went viral on Twitter, okay? And unfortunately, it was shared by so many quote-unquote skeptics. They were like, "Oh, we thought they were dumb. We thought they were dumb. But we didn't know they were this dumb, where they actually set their shoes on fire while they're wearing them." And this guy, his name is Phil Braun, posted these photos on Twitter, the photos going viral of his own feet after the burn. And he said, "I am in the hospital." Oh God, this is just a stupid tax is what this is. The gene pool needs chlorine. I can't believe this guy would actually do something like that. Somebody in the share, like, share, viral. Take a look at that photograph. Now take a look at this stock photograph from the Trauma Center in Australia, taken 2017, talking about different types of burns, 3rd-degree burns. You see anything familiar? There's his, and there's the other photo. Used for medical purposes, taken over a year ago in Australia. If we'd done just a little bit of digging, we would have realized that Phil is actually kind of a performance artist and an online prankster and comedian. Yeah, he set the shoes on fire while they were on his feet, but he lied about everything else, and he essentially trolled all of us, including the quote-unquote skeptics who didn't bother to check into Phil. They just shared the story at face value. I am embarrassed to admit that I got suckered in by this one. Anyone heard the story about the Ethiopian pastor who was baptizing people and got eaten by the crocodile? I wanted this story to be true. I didn't want the guy to die, but do you know that feeling? Like, There are people in this world who are that thick. Talked about it on my radio show. Bought it without checking it. After all, it was posted by the BBC. The story is, Pastor Docho Achete, he's out conducting a ceremony in a lake, baptismal ceremony, 80 people with him. And he's baptizing them one at a time, and it's a croc-infested lake, and he knows it, and the croc comes out and essentially baptizes him, and he is killed, all right? And I was like, you guys can't believe this. It's a great story, so I was busy telling it on the radio. He's just another Darwin Award, right? This is the herd thinning itself out. This is perhaps possibly good for all of us, right? And then my friend Hemant Mehta at The Friendly Atheist posted this. He said, no, an Ethiopian pastor didn't get eaten by a croc. I sent him an email and I'm like, shit, I got taken again. And he's right. His criticisms of the story were right. Yeah, it was posted by the BBC, but kind of a tabloidy section of the BBC, and there were no other reports anywhere about it happening. 80 people on location, not one person got anything recorded on film or video. What about the long history of similar stories just like this one that happened in other places or other dates? One uncorroborated source, the whole thing refuted on Snopes.com. Snopes.com already had a page about this story. I could have just gone there and done my own homework, but I jumped on the story because it proved my assertion that stupid kills. Stupid kills people all across the planet every single day. You and I know what it's like to read the story and we think, God, well, what did they expect? Somebody sent me this. We were talking about bias, our own biases, something supporting a position I already have. That religion harms people and makes them do stupid things, even at the risk of their own lives. And I get in a hurry and I just want to post it and get it out there. A guy sent me this, his name is Nikolai. It said, did you fact check this before reposting? And I said, I don't need to. It agrees with my preconceived views and biases, so it must be true. I think many of us are guilty of this. Time magazine had an article from earlier this year talking about how our brain tricks us into believing fake news. And I think some of the most damaging or dangerous fake news is partially or mostly true, right? How do smart people fall for this stuff? It says, we don't fall for false news because we're dumb often. It's maybe a matter of impulses, allowing the wrong impulses to drive the train. The average American is online 24 hours a week. So we're banding about inbox and feed and social media thread and comment section and email and headline and this and link and text. And we've come to the point where we only read the headlines. Anybody else guilty? I'm guilty. I've got 250,000 people on my Facebook page, and I'm seriously just going through, just trying to keep up, and I get in a hurry. We're social animals, so we have a desire to see people like what we post and engage with what we do, even if the story seems kind of dicey. We can be guilty of lazy thinking, and we have an innate desire to see a simple answer. I think often this feeds many of the binary decision-making processes that we see in politics and religion. People want A, B, black, white, yes, no. It's either or. Research says that we receive 5 times more information now than we did 3 decades ago. We're barraged with this stuff. I don't think we're wired for it myself. So pitches that seem to simplify the world, those resonate more with us. This is from an article in Time by a consumer psychologist named Kit Yarrow. It's called The Science of How Marketers and Politicians Manipulate Us. Dichotomous thinking. It's easy to pick one brand, one political party over another because they say the choice is clear. A, B, black, white, yes, no, either, or. The best messages like this, especially in advertising of any kind, and that can be advertising an idea, playing to our emotions, because emotions so often lead what we do, stroking our egos. Hey, I knew that. I could have told you that. I've said that for years. Makes us feel powerful and empowered. I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to go out. You know what? I'm going to post this to everybody I know. We're going to fix this. Using subconscious cues like the use of colors, red colors, especially in advertising. Urgency, intensity, appetite. Yellow, you can barely see it. Yellow is excitement and fun and buoyancy and adventure. Blue and green, calmness, trustworthiness. Monochrome actually engages more of our reasoning power. So if people are trying to persuade you through emotion, you might take a look at their advertising. It might be less dynamic, less contrasty, more monochrome in color. And this is really true with online banner ads. They're everywhere, and they're all designed to get our attention and manipulating us. Advertising barreling in to our conscious and subconscious minds. Now, I'm a video producer and an audio producer. I can potentially manipulate your perceptions and opinions without changing a word that my video interview subject says, without changing where they're at or anything like that. I can potentially change how you feel about them with a few video tricks. Let me show you. This is the guy I just interviewed. His name is Mohammed al-Qadra. He's an ex-Muslim from Jordan. He was afraid for his life. And so he was given asylum in Canada. Some free thought groups got together and helped him get out. Now he's safe, and now he's an activist in Canada and a human rights advocate, and he's a precious man. I had a chance to interview him at the American Atheist National Convention, and I hope he's okay with me using his sit down here because it's one of my most recent, okay? So I've got him on camera. He's sitting here. We were having a, you can see the whole video online. All I have to do to begin to change your perceptions about how you feel about this interview is color. If I want something more intense, a little black and white, let's crush those colors down, the blacks and everything. Let's crush all those contrasting type colors in. Maybe add some minor chords in the music. Now we're starting to become more intense. I can confuse what decade he was interviewed in. This looks like more of a 70s deal. I added a Kodak film stock film effect to the video, so now you don't know if I interviewed him yesterday or 3 decades from yesterday. You just never know. In video, we have what's called the rule of thirds. This is a rule that if you know it, you can then break it. But it's just a basic 101 rule of video. Normally, when you're videoing someone to interview, you put their eyes in the thirds of the frame. So if he's sitting over here, you put him here in the thirds. Or if he's sitting here, you put his eyes in the thirds. It's just a basic, sort of a 101 kind of a guideline for video producers. But if I wanted to change your perceptions about Mohammed al-Qadra without doing anything to what he says, I could actually lower him in the frame. So his eyes are closer down to the halfway mark. He's now more deferential, he's weaker. He is a little bit overwhelmed by his surroundings. And again, this is not always the case. These are tricks that can be used in different ways. But this is just one way it can be used. If I want him to feel more imposing, more threatening, I just ramp up the close-up. Eyes, he's right there, he's on top of you, he is immediate. And if I change the background so there's a little more red in the background, now we're really intense. Now, he's saying the same words he said in the original interview, but I can alter your perception, I can alter how you receive that as a storyteller with just basic tools. And this kind of stuff is happening every second of every day, everywhere we look. In my defense, I framed his eyes just a little bit below the third because I didn't like his head cut off. It didn't look right in the frame. But we just used the natural colors of the room, and the video is a great sort of a chronicle of his escape from Jordan. Storytellers should use the tools of storytelling, but we should do so without changing or cheating the facts. Those who watch and listen to and read the stories, we must be acutely aware that pretty much everybody has an agenda. Everybody. Everybody's got an angle. We're creatures of emotion as well as reason. We're creatures of emotion, and yes, we can be manipulated. This is Ken Burns. He's the producer of one of my favorite pieces of television ever and my favorite documentary ever called The Civil War. And he's done a lot of other great work. He talked about storytelling and manipulation in this very short clip.
Godard said, cinema is truth 24 times a second. Maybe. It's lying 24 times a second, too. All the time. All story is manipulation. Is there acceptable manipulation? You bet. People say, oh boy, I was so moved to tears in your film. That's a good thing? I manipulated that. That's part of storytelling. I didn't do it disgenuinely, I did it sincerely. I am moved by that too. That's manipulation.
It's a constant challenge for us as storytellers, and we're all storytellers in our own way, to make sure that while our feelings can be great and healthy motivators to action, We always lead with reason. Like some people get weird about emotion, especially those who've been harmed by the church. You know, I came from those emotional experiences and I'll never go back. Well, the difference was that they were leading with emotion. But emotion is part of the human experience. It's what connects us to each other and to our world in many ways. I think we embrace emotion, but the difference is that emotion doesn't lead us around by the nose. Our reason leads us around, but emotion can help inform and enhance the human experience. One of the best defenses for me is to slow down. I can't believe I'm showing this in the, let's go to that one, that's a PG version. Am I getting the full story? Let's slow down. I'm totally guilty. You know, there aren't enough hours in the day. There are too many pages, there are too many emails, there are too many advertisements, there's too much sensory overload. It's overwhelming. I can't keep up. I gotta go. Slow. We must slow down. Am I getting the full story? Am I telling? Am I sharing the full story? How many of us have been here, right? You're going down the, scroll. Oh, that's cute, like, share, scroll, share, scroll. Did we read past the headline to the first paragraph? Did we find a source from the story? Did we corroborate the source? Have we looked at the legitimate criticisms of the story by legitimate critics? And that's a big caveat. Dr. Harriet Hall, the Skepdocs, writes for Science-Based Medicine, and she's like, go find what the most legitimate critics of a claim are, and then read or watch those criticisms. You may disagree with them, but at least put them on your radar. Do I believe it? Am I sharing it because it proves what I already think? How biased am I? How aware am I of my biases? Am I missing something? Is it factual information? You know what? That's not enough. We saw information. Do I have enough information to have perspective? Is reason driving the train, or am I jumping off the rails? Now here's the encouraging thing, because I'm an encourager. I don't want you guys to go all drive off a cliff when you leave this place today. I want you to feel encouraged, and this is not a false encouragement. I honestly think the reason we get misled by a lot of this stuff is because we have a genuine desire for a better world, right? We share about the injustices and the craziness because we genuinely think we need to expose this insanity and make it stop, show people how unreasonable it is. And when we see somebody treated poorly, or we see an inflammatory politician doing something wrong, or when we see this, we see that, we want people to be aware. We want people to join our rallying cry to try to fix it. And I think largely that comes from a good place. I have a feeling many of us are activists by nature. Whether we're in our families, our neighborhoods, our communities, our city governments, whatever, we want to make positive change in the world. I think a lot of the reasons we get misled come from a good place. And we want to make this crazy world even less so. We're going to get this wrong. Don't beat yourself up too much when you make a mistake, because we'll all make them. Let us all eat the crow. Let us all apologize. Let's print and publish the retraction. And let's try to clarify the record when we do make a mistake. But let us always keep our eyes open and learn from our mistakes, and never forget how important it is to pause in this crazy, fast-paced, overwhelming cacophony of information. Pause, slow down, take a breath, check yourself. Do some homework, get the information and enough of it to have perspective. And when we root ourselves in legitimate and credible information, it is then that we can make for a better world. Thank you all so very much.
Thanks, Seth, so much for a great talk. Okay, what happens now is the following. We're going to have a musical interlude, and today it's somebody you probably saw yesterday in Madison at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Dan Barker. I don't know if he was there or not, but you probably know him. And he has a similar life story. And so we're going to have a song from Dan Barker for our musical interlude. We'll be passing a basket, and we would love for people to put in some money to help support our programming. We suggest $5, but we're happy about all of any dollars. We want all the dollars. We want the most dollars. 10% of what we collect today will be given to a charity to be chosen by Ethical Action Committee. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's already been decided. I don't know about it. So for right now, we're just going to be quiet, pass the basket, and listen to Dan Barker.
The farmers pray for precipitation, and they say, in God we trust. Then along comes a drought and dries their crops out and turns their prayers into dust. The next time they need some assistance, they should take the advice of Mark Twain, who said it's better to check the weather report before you pray for rain. Nothing fails like prayer. Nothing fails like prayer. Use your mind and you will find that nothing fails like prayer. You reach the final week of the school year, but you haven't studied your best. So you stay up and cram for the final exam, then pray for God's help on the test. Then you answer the questions with assurance that the Lord will help you sail through. When the results are returned, what have you learned? God's no smarter than you. Nothing fails like prayer. Nothing fails like prayer. Use your mind and you will find that nothing fails like prayer.
Okay, so now's the, we're gonna have time for questions for Seth. And so here's some things about questions. Questions end with question marks. And they're different from statements that end in periods. So if you find yourself in the middle of a statement, I might like sort of scowl. And you're going to regroup and find a question really fast. If you're sitting in the balcony and have a question, you're welcome to come down to the stairs, at the bottom of the stairs here, and we'll try to include you as well. But I won't come up to the balcony. This is a microphone. If you're not holding it, you shouldn't be talking. And if you are holding it, you should talk right like this, if that makes sense. So I'm going to take the microphone around the audience. If you have a question, raise your hand, and I'll come to you. And when other people are talking, I hope you'll put your hands down. Thank you.
Remind me to never cross Katie. That woman will mess you up. By the way, that's only the second time I've given the presentation. Did you guys have a good time? Feel pretty good? Okay, well, I'm sort of hammering it. I just want to make sure that there weren't any times I was looking for, like, moving eyes and drool and some other things to make sure that you guys were having a good time. But it felt pretty good, yeah, so far? Okay. Anybody? I don't have any great wisdom, but I'd love to have a conversation.
Thanks for a great talk. I was a little confused about your presentation in regard to this fella Avery. Were all of these additional facts that you elicited, was this from the second incident?
Yes.
From both incidents, or just all from the second incident?
All of that is from the murder of Teresa Hallback, the second incident for which he was in prison.
Where does that stand now? Has he been convicted? Is it still in the justice system?
They are actually producing part 2 of Making a Murderer for Netflix, because the first one was a ratings just bonanza. He has exhausted all of his appeals. He's exhausted all of his resources and is now apparently in prison for the rest of his life. And his nephew Brendan, I don't know what his prison term is. His story is a bit more complicated, but to my knowledge, he's in for life. But they are continuing to petition for his release based on the information they learned in the documentary on Netflix.
Wow, thank you.
Oh, it's an honor, thank you.
What sources do you use to validate things when you have a doubt or you want to challenge anything? I'm beginning to feel like a real cynic because I don't believe anybody about anything. I don't like that. Help me.
I want you to be my fact checker. Why, you come work for me. That's a great question. We had this yesterday in Milwaukee, and there's no catch-all answer. You saw the BBC, one of their branches got taken. I mean, we're talking about media outlets populated by humans, and they all have their biases. They all have their problems. But I begin with the blue chip players, the gold standards. If I see it in Time versus seeing it in, say, natural news, I tend to go with Time. I tend to go with more high-profile publications that have more critical eyes upon it. Scientific American is a great example. Nature, we're talking about flawed, imperfect publications, but there are so many people who are in the science or skeptical community who will fact check what they publish, that if there is something wrong with it, we will know about it pretty darn quick. It's just, the challenge becomes looking for it, to find it whenever those criticisms come out. There are some I know to stay away from, and I don't have the list here. I wish I'd gotten it. I was talking to Andrew Torres at opening arguments about some, like Occupy Democrats. I'm a Democrat. I'm a hippie liberal, right? But that's a terrible resource for us to be sharing because they share a lot of really sketchy, shaky information. And so we ask ourselves, are they journalists? Are they scientists? Are they experts in their field? Are they checked by experts in their field? What is their agenda? And how much do we feel like that agenda affects what they report? And honestly, I just start with the blue chip, sort of a standard bearers of journalism and science, and then begin to search out the critiques of other standard bearers. If you don't know what the website is, or if it has a website that's like, crystals give you eternallife.com, those are probably easy ones to get rid of. But I'm not Yoda on this one. If anybody's got a better answer, I would welcome your comment, even if it has a period at the end of it. Please tell me what you think. Anybody else?
Seth, thanks. I appreciate watching you speak. Found you on the Atheist Experience episode. Kind of binge watched that for the last month and a half. A lot of fun to watch.
Thank you.
So I have a question on the term atheism. So I actually wrote it down here. I'm just going to read what I wrote. Atheism seems to have an old school definition and a new school definition, with the old being an assertion that no God exists, and the new being atheism is non-belief in God's existence. When talking with religious people or people convinced in the supernatural, the word atheism seems to relate to the old school definition more than the new school. Would you, as a recently born again atheist, would a recently born again atheist benefit from identifying as an atheist in our culture today, and how can we do so and reduce the stigmatism that we're asserting no God exists if that's what we do in fact believe?
Where do you get the assertion, and I'm not taking you to task, that there's an old school definition? Who was using this definition, a proactive, declarative statement that no God exists, period?
I think these are personal experiences from people that I've talked with. Philosopher Alan Watts is one person that I've seen explained in that certain way. Reading online forums seems to be, atheists believe no God exists. And so it's a little confusing to me, I guess.
I don't get too trapped in the semantics of it. I don't believe in God, and I say that there is no God. But I usually start by saying that I have no reason to believe in a God. But I say that God does not exist the same way I say that Santa Claus does not exist, and unicorns and Thor and all those things do not exist. I mean, we always allow for the introduction of new evidence. Who was it? I saw this quote between Hitchens and the pastor apologist whose name escapes me in the film Collision. And they were talking about that a closed mind, an open mind is meant to close on something. Right? Someone tells me I have a closed mind, I'll be like, yeah. Right? But it's not welded closed, it's not permanently closed. But if you come across an idea like the fact of evolution, the science of evolution, the overwhelming avalanche of evidence supporting evolution, we can then say, yes, I accept evolution based on the evidence. My mind can be closed in that way. Now, if something else happens, we can pry it back open and we can talk again. But on the subject of God, there is no God. Like, there's no evidence, there's never been proof, it's never been demonstrated. Who's got was it Matt who has the t-shirt that says, list of scientific claims that have been refuted by religion, and it's just blank spaces, one after the other? Right? He's got great t-shirts, by the way. But I don't like to lead with, there is no God, or there can be no God. The only time I really do that is when I say that there can be no benevolent involved God. I mean, that's an easy one. There's no involved personal benevolent deity that's demonstrable. And there is no God, like there is no Santa Claus, like there is no Thor, Wotan, whatever. You can frame it however you want. Atheism is the lack of a belief in God's, period. The definition, it works for me, it works for everybody else. I do not believe in God. Now, there are atheists who run the gamut on every other thing. You guys have seen it, right? Put 10 atheists in a room and get them talking about, right, Cubs, White Sox, or right? You can get them talking about a number of different things. You'll find atheist flat earthers. You'll find atheists who believe in ghosts and aliens. You'll find it. But I do not believe in God, period. That's atheism to me. So, I mean, that's the definition I stick with, and I think that's productive. I don't know if it's a very good answer to your question. No, just something.
I'm to your left.
Yep.
Hi, Seth. Brian. So I wonder, what's, with your experience, when you have friends and close friends and family that believe in, for lack of a better term, woo, or the sites that you were talking about, natural news and things like that, where they only look at those, they have that tunnel vision for that stuff, and you'll show them facts that you found other places, and they'll just say, well, you know, your sources are lying or your sources are fake. What have you found is the best way to get through to them when you go, well, you know, no, my facts are true and yours are fake? Well, that doesn't help, because they just will say, no, you're wrong, back and forth. What have you found is the best personal way to get through to them, to show them that, you know, I don't know.
You guys can hear me thinking, can you? You can hear me thinking.
So, yeah.
How do I get strongly religious people who aren't listening to accept the evidence? How do I deal with that? Tequila. That's how I do it. Tequila.
How much?
I'm going to say something kind of controversial. A few might consider controversial, I don't know. I think you're wasting your time. Dale McGowan talks about someone who has a greater desire to believe than they have to know. So when I go to my religious parents, and we don't really have a relationship, Mom, Dad, and I at this point, because I'm an atheist and atheist activist, and they believe in the Bible, and they believe in Christianity, and they believe in heaven, and yes, they believe in hell, and that I'm going there. And we've had 10 years off and on of conversations, right? And there's a part of us that just thinks, if only I explained it this way. If only I showed them this. And when I first became an atheist, I was sending all the stuff that I had learned as I was coming out of my faith to everybody with this naive notion that they would all just slough off the religious chains, and we would all frolic into the fields of reason, and we would all sing Kumbaya together, and we would all embrace science and live a rational life rooted in the real. Nobody. I sent a letter to everybody in my family, because I didn't want them to hear about my apostasy through the grapevine. I wanted them to hear it from me. And so I sent everybody a long email that just said, here's kind of how I got here, and here's where I'm at, but I'm still me. I'm still a good man. I still love all of you, and I hope you all still love me, blah, blah, blah. I got one response back. Out of everybody. No curiosity whatsoever. Nobody thought, oh, that's a pretty smart dude. I mean, he seems like a good guy. How did he get here? We should go have coffee and find out what he's going through. Maybe if he's got something that he knows that we don't, we should all get together and find out, so we can all embrace the best ideas. Nobody said that. They said, oh, so you joined the religion of atheism. That's the one email I got back. Until your family's desire to believe becomes greater or less than their desire to know. Their desire to know is going to have to become greater. You're wasting your time. I honestly think that your secular life needs to be about you. And for me, that means boundaries. So your life needs to be lived on your terms. Now, if you're trying to get your family to not disrespect you or speak negatively to you or shame you, that's not about religious belief, that's about boundaries. We can disagree on these hugely important issues, but you don't have permission to come into my life and do this, and this, or else I may have to remove you from my circle. I don't want to. But I think the best medicine is for you to be you at the volume you choose, live a loud, proud, wonderful, fulfilled, purpose-filled, secular life in full view of them and the kids and the nephews and everybody else. And when they're ready, it is my hope they will come to you and say, look, I've got some doubts. I've got some questions. I want to tell a story that I told in Milwaukee yesterday. It was kind of a long one. I may come back to it that may help reinforce that. But you aren't going to change their minds unless their desire to know becomes great enough. And as they watch you, you don't fit into their box. Right? Atheists are miserable and sad and pathetic, and they're all these horrible people, you know? And I'm guessing you're not that. I mean, who knows, really? I'm guessing you're a good man. They're going to have a harder and harder time fitting you into that box. And now you're messing up their categories, and now there's cognitive dissonance, and you never know what's going on in the backs of their skulls. And maybe at one point you can have a real conversation where they're genuinely wanting to know. Okay? We'll do a couple more. I want to be a good steward of your time.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that. It's sort of related, but to the earlier question about the validity of sources and how do you know, and you mentioned Snopes a couple of times. Are you aware of Snopes being wrong at some point? And does someone Snopes? Like,
that's a great question. Well, all I know is that Snopes is it's a criticism-based culture. So when something is posted, I know that if you read the threads that are attached to those, you will find people who are still challenging. But Snopes is still run by flawed, biased human beings. It's a very valid point.
you have time for, okay.
I don't hear very well, and I apologize if you've covered this subject and I missed it, but I'd like to know how you feel about those of us who feel that one of the prevailing problems of our culture is the profit motive, and how that relates to the advertising industry, which we are subjected to almost every moment of our lives.
Well, I agree. Did you guys see the Mr. Rogers documentary?
Yeah.
I cried. Did you cry? I cried during the Mr. Rogers documentary. But Fred Rogers was talking about, he was lamenting as he was trying to inform and educate young children, that those who were making all the media targeted to children just saw them as little consumers. And so he's right. We have a society that gives us great benefit, but it has also made us all consumers. We're all about the stuff. And I do think it's a real challenge. I read an interesting article a few years ago that I found true in my own life. It said that the people who spend their resources on experiences over things are happier people. You know, I've got stuff. I'm a guy, I got toys. But those people who spend their time and money and resources on experiences, making memories, chewing the marrow out of every moment, having an experience on this earth as a sentient living being, those people are largely happier than people who just collect the trinkets and the toys. And I think we should be less materialistic and more about creating positive experiences.
Oh, there's one way over there.
FYI, I brought books. I only have books. Make your checks payable to Save the Andrews Family Foundation. Thanks. No, honestly, I'm honored that you would spend part of the weekend with me. If you do want a book, I do have some in the back. But
Last question back here.
regardless, before you leave, make sure that I get a chance to at least wave at you and say hi. Even if you're in a hurry, you have a deadline and you need to cut in line, let me thank you personally for coming. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Thank you for your talk.
Mm-hmm.
Could you clarify, is your podcast, with what you focused on with this murder trial, you're not simply promoting atheism, you're examining topics outside the sphere of atheism. So could you clarify what the focus of your podcast is? And secondly, how did you bring this into being? Is this something that somehow you obtained funding for, or how did this come just out of thin air? How did you accomplish this?
On the first day, I said, "Let there be lights." Well, I'll answer your second question first. Look, am I pushing your clock if I talk for a second? Are we good? Okay. I want to be a good steward of your time, but thank you. So I came out of Christian audio and video production. I came out of Christian broadcasting. But when I came out as an atheist, or when I realized I was one in 2008, I had no one. I I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I am 20 minutes from the praying hand statue at Oral Roberts University. Rhema Bible Training Center is just down the road. The first 3 questions people ask when they meet you is, what's your name, what do you do for a living, and where do you go to? Right? An atheist, it's like Oklahomans never really get to see one in the wild. So I was isolated and alone. I had no one. And so I started the website for 2 reasons. One, I was hoping to be a part of the conversation, challenging my former faith. But 2, I needed to know I wasn't by myself. Is there anybody else out there going through this stuff? Is there anybody else who's been up all night with their gut in a knot, who's listened to their parents crying and telling them that they're going to hell, and they failed as a mom, and they failed as a dad, and is anybody else being called this and that and an agent of Satan in a midlife crisis? Is anybody else worried about their religious employer finding a reason to fire them in their late 30s when they have a mortgage and car payments and utilities and family to support? Is anybody else wondering, what's this going to do to me? And so I started the website thinking, let's build a community. And I didn't even know there was such a thing as podcast radio. Podcasting, I didn't know what that was until 2010. When it came on my radar, I thought, oh my goodness, I thought I'd left radio for good in 2004. I thought I'd never get a chance to be a radio host again. And so we started the broadcast with 1,000 people, and we tackle a different topic every week, or mostly a different topic every week. And I think we're up to about 48 million downloads, something like that. It has been one of the greatest joys of my life. It's something I never expected, but I use the website as a conduit to get the radio and the video shows out. I'm on social media to connect with people. I do the podcast once a week, and we'll cover things like everything from Scientology to, we'll get into evangelical politics and the theocrats. We'll talk about cults. We did a 2-part series, a fascinating series on cults and how they get you, how intelligent people get sucked into cults and many never get out. We've done we did a compelling discussion last week, I think, and people were talking about it in the lobby today. This is life-changing information that everyone needs to know. Is it okay to clean your ears with Q-tips? Can you stick a Q-tip in your ear? This is stuff our audience needs to know about. Like, we talk about life stuff. So some weeks it's a heavy topic, and some weeks we'll just throw in just funny stuff or life stuff, or talk about family, or talk about whatever. We'll change the subject. Every October I do a broadcast called Ghost Stories, because I'm a big Ghost Stories fan for Halloween. And so we'll produce a big Ghost Stories thing where we talk about things that go bump in the night. And it's mostly just family. It's weird. You have no idea. To be able to come to a room like this and be surrounded by people who don't think I'm nuts, who don't think I'm an agent of Satan, who don't think I'm in a midlife crisis, right? People who share my desire to find the truth, whatever it is. And I tell my religious family and friends, I'm like, you know what, if God shows up tomorrow, I want to know that, right? You guys are the same way. If Jesus or whoever shows up tomorrow, that would be information I would like to have. And we'll explore that. We'll figure that, whatever the truth is. I just don't want to start my life with the answer and then ask all the questions. I think I'd like to ask the questions first and live an honest life. And it's weird because now that I don't think I was adopted by an all-powerful wizard to go on a magical quest with an eternal reward with mansions in heaven, and now that I don't know I'm going to live forever, and now that I don't think I'm the center of the universe, and now that I don't feel that everything happens for a reason, now that I know that I'm just a speck on a speck inside a universe that doesn't care if I exist, but I'm living my life honestly, and I have the privilege of drawing breath and having the human experience. I am happier and more centered and more focused and more fulfilled now in my life than I've ever been. Does anybody else feel that in your own life? You've never did that. And that is my hope for you. Live your life truthfully as best you can on your own terms. You are not on this planet to keep other people comfortable. Just make sure that you're living your life on your terms at the volume you choose. Live it honestly. Design your own sense of purpose, your own goals and dreams, And I honestly think that you will, and I can share that experience with other people and make this world genuinely a better place. Thank you all so very much.
Seth, thanks for a fabulous talk and Q&A. We're going to have some quick announcements. If you have an announcement that is not society related, please post your flyer on the community bulletin board out in the hall, or talk to people during the coffee hour, and consider sending an email to